one podcast, mining the Magic the Gathering community for salt. This is the Howling Salt Mine.
It's the Howling Salt Mine. The Howling Salt Mine.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Howling Salt Mine podcast, the podcast where we delve into those salty mines of the Magic the Gathering community, find the saltiest stories, the saltiest posts, those salty stories that I was going somewhere, but I lost my chain of thought.
I feel like you were doing fine, and then you just
opted not to continue.
You opted to not complete.
I just didn't have anything to say.
I'm gonna fire this guy. Get him
My
out of
brain
here.
just like tooted.
You're going the place you go every week, and for some reason you just halfway through opted to not go there anymore.
My brain
Yeah.
just like fell off, man. As always, I'm your host, Sam, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Mike and Tony. Say hey, guys.
What up? What up? What up?
Hey everyone.
And of course, I think it's been a while since we mentioned it, but they always say hello in the opposite order that I introduce them. I say Mike and Tony, and then Tony and Mike talk.
It's been a while.
It has been a while since we said that.
It's been a while.
Every time you say that, like I feel like I can't. It's
Just
happened
in your
once, and I
head.
just can't not. Yeah, it's always
I know.
there now.
So played some cEDH yesterday.
Oh, hell yeah. Tell us.
Spell table random. Mark it on your bingo cards.
Yeah.
Was playing with a couple patrons, so we just needed the one more. So we got on, spell table, put the call out for a cEDH game, which is usually a little safer than looking for a casual on spell table as well, because
Yep.
at least they're going to bring some kind of reasonable deck. You don't have to worry too much about the pregame conversation. But the first thing that happens when he comes in is just like immediately you can tell there's a different vibe. Like, when you encounter someone and you can tell that they're like against you right away.
Yeah.
Like stepped in and just immediately it was like, we were talking about a brew that one of the patrons was doing, and he was like kind of talking through like, oh, so what are some intuition lines without white in it? But they were playing Rocco while they were talking through this brew they were doing. And this new guy joins and is like, why do you need to not have white in it? It's you're playing Rocco. Like, what? And we're like, no, man, let's cool off a little bit. We're talking about a different deck. And just throughout the game would meet every decision with like really? Wow, really?
Oh my God, dude. That's so annoying. What deck were they playing?
They were playing Tivit. So we're like, okay, that's good. Things that they resolved in Tivit. Turn one, they play a Lotus Petal and a Felwar Stone into a Rhystic Study. Like someone else has a Rhystic Study out. So they just dump cards into another player's hand.
Okay.
All right, maybe
Nice.
not the best move.
Yeah.
They follow it up with a Counterbalance
Nice.
and a Vamp Tutor, neither of which they pay for Rhystic with, to get a Graph Digger's Cage. Also, which they don't pay for Rhystic with. So they're
All
just
on
like,
turn one?
no, on turn two.
Oh
So
my
like
God.
their turn one is 2 cards to Rhystic Study to get a Felwar Stone out. Their turn two is a Counterbalance and a Vamp Tutor, also not paying for anything for Rhystic Study. And we were like, that's interesting. And then the thing that they tutored that they played turn three was the Graph Digger's Cage. So Garbage, who's in seat one, is playing Rocco. I'm playing Sisse, and we're both
And
like,
that's their name. Mike isn't
Yeah.
just calling this person
no, they're not
garbage.
just garbage.
This is one of our patrons.
So we're like, okay, that's interesting. Wow, that's really going to hurt us.
Yeah.
Ouch. Like, oof. And they're immediately like, haha, yes, that's actually why I tutored it. And we're like, oh, interesting. You searched for something that's just going to stop us and it's not going to help you win at all, because they're still sitting there with like 2 mana and a 6 mana commander they're going to have to try and resolve at some point.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird move to use your tutor to get a turn 3 cage.
Yes,
I don't know. It's not really what Tiva wants to do.
exactly. And then instead of having, not even like 1 degree of recognition that we're not saying like, hey, you're an awful person, I'm really frustrated to see that card out. What we're saying is, hey, maybe you should think about not doing that. Not because like selfishly it stops me, but truly because you may be shooting yourself in the foot by like playing that way.
Yeah.
We're throwing ideas out there, but they at one point say, see how much you're complaining? That's why I tutored this.
Oh man, I think this player sounds kind of awesome now, but keep going.
Yeah. I was gonna say it sounds like the correct move.
Yeah. Sounds like a couple salty
I was
little
gonna say, it sounds like
bitches
some
were
salty
crying
bitches.
tears.
Well, anyway, they continue to have virtually no impact on the game except for a couple counterbalance flips that occasionally are relevant.
Yeah.
And President Ketchup, who had the wristic, cruises through the game. We forgive him for not realizing that he didn't have enough mana for a pact trigger, but had played a Pact of Negation.
Oh.
So we walked back like 3 turns to where the Pact of Negation would have been cast.
Oh my God.
3
and let them,
turns?
not 3 turn rotations, but like he was in seat 3 and he would have pacted something that person in seat 4 had cast. So then it went through seat 1 and 2 and then got to 4. And then he was like, oh, I can't play through the pact trigger. And we're all like, oh. 2 of us were like, well, maybe you just eat the trigger and learn and never do that again. And then Garbage was like being very nice and was like, well,
Man,
it's
fuck
fine.
that shit. I'd be like,
Yeah.
you gotta count your fucking mana. If you play a goddamn Pact of Negation, you
Yeah.
best have 5.
You gotta be
It's
ready.
true.
Or you better
gotta be ready.
win before it even like happens.
Yeah,
Like,
it's true. You better. But yeah, so then President Ketchup took it after having not
after having
having
not
missed
paid
the
his
the
tax.
pact trigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just this really odd, weird game.
Weird
and
fucking game.
the context also was that we had someone like halfway through the game, another patron showed up and was like ready to play. And the 3 of us were like, oh my God, get me out of this game. This guy. So I was kind of like, I mean, maybe if we don't give him the pack trigger,
The game
end
ends.
the game, and we can
Hmm.
move on and play a more fun game, which is exactly what happened. So I don't regret that at all. But man, just like people that show up and you can just tell are immediately against everything. Like
Yeah.
the opponent extends well beyond the boundaries of the game and extends
Yeah.
into all social interaction that you're having with the person. And man, it really got me just for
Yeah.
the minute 1 recognition that I was going to be sitting at this table for, an hour and a half playing against someone that was going to be grumpy and snarky about every single thing that got said.
Yeah.
Especially when you're playing with like a couple buddies that
Yes.
you know. And
Yeah.
there's just that 4th person that's just like dumping cold water on the social interaction
Well,
over
that
and
was
over and over again.
That was the interesting thing too, is like they came in and the 3 of us were kind of like shooting the shit and like talking about this brew, and like you could tell, like we've all played games together, the 3 of us, you could tell there was a positive kind of vibe and energy going. And to not only like not pick up on that, but immediately like reject that and be like, well, you can run white because you're in Rocco. It's like, okay, man. All right.
The neckbeard was strong with him.
Give it like a single minute to figure out what the table's talking about before
Yeah.
you jump in,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Anyway, that was
Oh, man.
my yesterday's salt.
That is
Boy.
interesting. I love that. Were you totally stacked out because of the Graph Digger's Cage?
Well, I was going to be. So the Graph Digger's Cage, the worst part was the Graph Digger's Cage was the thing that President Ketchup pacted that we then rolled back. So I had a turn that I went through like that I was like, okay, so I'm not stacked out because of the Graph Digger's Cage. So I had a turn that I like passed through, leaving mana open for a Sisei activation. And then when we rewound, it was like, okay, actually there is a Graph Digger's Cage. So then I had to like find something else to do with my mana, and I had nothing really useful to do
Fucking
with my
kangaroo
mana.
court, man. It's like
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it was odd.
In that moment, you guys should have either just had him die or just
We should have
shuffled up and
Yeah.
like been done with it.
I think you're right, you know?
Rewound that
It's true.
much.
It's true. In our defense,
There's no defense that
President
you can
Ketchup
say here.
still pretty new to cEDH. That is the defense. It's not enough that we should have done what we did, probably, but it is kind of the
You're
reasoning
gonna learn
behind it.
today.
Exactly.
There's only one way to learn.
I did say that out loud. I was like, well, you'll learn really well. You will learn to not do that. So hopefully the lesson is still there, even though the game resulted in a big
At
fat
least the
W for
neckbeard
him.
didn't win.
True.
Yeah, I don't know what would make me saltier. Having to rewind 2 turns of play. Like 2 turns is so generous. I hope President Ketchup like like Venmo you $5 after that because that's so generous, man.
The problem is he was doing us a service and getting us out of the game, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah. Put a big old asterisk on that entire game.
Well, we were talking about it later, and he was like, "At least I won," and I was like, "Yeah, well,
you did not. We let you
won
win.
after we let you not lose."
Yeah, you did not. You did not win. Actually, that is so funny, dude.
Well,
should we get into
Do we
it,
get
guys?
into it now? Yeah. Yes.
Let's fucking do it. Let's get into the mine proper, guys. We are in the atrium. We're in our little preamble area now. Let's saunter on in, shall we? Grab your pickaxes, get your little lantern. Let's get ready to talk about some salt.
Oh, but wait,
Huh?
Samuel.
Yes,
Oh.
Anthony?
What is this salt of which you speak?
Michael.
I will gladly tell you. This is why I just said his name. Michael is here too. Great question, Tony. Salt is frustration in the game. Everything from the full shakers of somebody rage quitting, scooping, and throwing their deck across the room to the small grains of somebody at the table with a weird vibe. Somebody who's making weird comments, and maybe the gameplay is like okay, but it's just throwing off the vibe of the night. It's not really something that makes you salty, but it makes you frustrated with that gaming experience, like the story Mike told earlier. And salt comes in many different forms. And what we're doing is we're going to talk about it. We got 3 lovely salty stories. We're going to dip into each one, talk about the salt.
But why do we talk about it, Sam?
Thanks, Tony. We
I
talk
got
about
you.
salt so that we can learn from it. This is really an educational podcast.
Hell
And
yeah.
in the future, hopefully not be salty ourselves.
Fuck yeah. Lay
Yep.
one on me.
Here is our first salty story. And this one comes to us from our Patreon. This one comes to us from our buddy Locum. And it goes, "Hi, guys. Here's a salty story I mentioned on the Discord. Yesterday, I arrived late to my LGS, and my friends had a pod ready, but then got me for a 5-player higher power game. It was fun and ended around turn 7. I'd said I'd sit out for the next one, and then we could jam some cEDH. People started coming up to the table I was sitting at, so I sort of got dragged into another game. The commanders were Zur, Eternal Schemer, Edgar Markov, the Dragon, and Samut, Voice of Dissent. My Samut deck is heavily inspired by Joe Johnson's deck, a Naya Timmy Shell with Primal Surge as the win con. Before the game, we had a small chat, and everybody was aware that we were all running powerful commanders and tuned decks, but not cEDH. The Zur player and I pointed out that we had combos in our decks. My turn 2 play was Survival of the Fittest, admittedly a strong card. Zur's turn 2 was Heuristic Study, also a strong card, I would say. Turns went by, I tutored for a Dockside, the treasure count was around 7, and the Zur player had drawn 10 or more cards off of Heuristic Study. We all ramped, and the Zur player played Heliod Sun Crowned, telegraphing a combo, and then I top decked Temur Sabertooth. The table was politicking a little bit at this point, pointing out threats, etc. I mentioned that Zur had drawn 10 or more cards off their study and had a combo piece out, which the guy took a little too personally and started to defend himself, not his board, but himself, and his reasonings for running study, and how this is a high-power game and vice versa. Quite the pushes glasses backwards and starts the actually type. He then pointed out that I tutored Dockside, and I responded, "You are right, I did." On my turn, I played Shalai, Voice of Plenty, for some added protection for the combo, then Dockside, then Temur Sabertooth, and proceeded to make infinite mana. I asked whether there were any responses between each activation, and nobody said anything. The Zur player was livid, huffing and puffing. I cast Samut and Nyxbloom Ancient, and had Seedborn Muse and Captain Sisay in hand. Jesus. The idea is to untap every turn, grab Yeva, and start to play at instant speed. I dumped 1 billion mana into Shalai and made all my creatures big, but here is the issue. I completely forgot that Nyxbloom had Trample and that the Dragon player was open for an unblocked attacker. The view of his board was very messy and was blocked by his drink at the time. So in my mind, I could only take one person out with a flying Sisay since everyone else had creatures. The Zur player was talking over every single game action I was taking, commenting and saying things like, "Oh, look at him stroking his cock."
Whoa. What?
There you have it. I don't think I have ever said that in a game.
You
In a game?
100% have. Are you kidding me?
When I have ever said to you, "Oh, look at Seb sitting over there stroking his cock."
I don't know if you've ever said the word cock, but you've definitely said stroking.
That's specific terminology.
Yeah, you've definitely said like masturbatory allegory.
Adding the cock in there is like it's too far.
Yeah, it's a little blue.
That's what's too. It's good to know
Yeah.
where your lines are, Tony.
Yeah, it's a little
Yeah.
blue for me. Man, sometimes I read these stories and that shit comes out of nowhere and I get so surprised. Like,
It's just a little surprise in there for you.
it really is. It's just like
Easter egg.
gameplay, cock. And you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, okay. And it continues. I calmly asked whether the blue deck had any responses to what I was doing, to which they said nothing. So I only attacked him and took him out of the game, feeling pretty confident that I could end the game on my next turn. But again, I forgot I had trample and an open attack, so I wasn't sure I could end the game right there. Nor was I paying enough attention to realize that I had a game-ending line ready to go because I had someone screaming at me from a foot away, nonstop, being exceptionally rude and aggressive, cutting me off mid-sentence as I was taking my turn. I passed the turn and the Zur players started raising their voice, visibly angry at me and shouting nonstop for not ending the game and playing with my food. I turned to him and said, "You need to calm down and lower your voice. You're being extremely annoying right now, so please stop." Multiple times, my friends that I usually play with at the table next to us kept asking, "Hey man, you good? What the hell is going on over there?" Because the guy was throwing a tantrum.
Wow.
The Edgar player ends up vamp tutoring for a farewell on upkeep and cast it on their turn. While I was being yelled at by the Zur player, I went into the tank and started thinking about my way out and remembered a play that involved Yeva, Rocco, and Kriyan Ranger. So I ended up winning with farewell on the stack, having brought all of those out, grabbing a Terror of the Peaks, and infinitely bouncing Nyx Bloom Ancient at instant speed. The Edgar player said they dealt with kids at work, so they didn't want to sit at the table with the Zur player screaming and left,
That's amazing.
congratulating me for the win and complimenting my deck. Either way, we got another fourth player and got another game going. This time I chose something with no combos. Rafine, which still packs a punch. I know you know. Yes, I do know.
Hell
I know.
While the Zur player chose Elminster for a full control-focused game, probably to get back at me. Before the game, the Ur-Dragon player, who's now playing Giada, asked a question about the difference between spin downs and non-spin downs, and the Salt Lord grabbed the D20 in front of me and chucked it across the table, saying, "Now watch," while explaining how easy it is to cheat with it, which actually wasn't a spin down. It was a Baldur's Gate D20. He got all concerned and embarrassed when I turned to my friend in the pod next to ours and said, "Hey, this guy just yeeted your D20. Then he looked for the D20 for 2 or 3 minutes. Oh, God, it's so awkward. What is happening? The night ended with the guy scooping at instant speed when I targeted Elminster with Imprisoned in the Moon, complaining about how I targeted them the whole game, which was partially true, but mostly because there was a Pillowfort deck and another with a scary large amount of angels, so targeting him made sense, not to mention they kept countering my stuff. At the end of the night, my buddies kept imitating the tantrum guy for the tantrum he threw 3 hours or so straight. Now he was making comments about the first game during the last game, continuously huffing and puffing, losing the D20 across the table, and how the fit they were throwing was super distracting. I took a cold shower right as I got home to wash away all the NaCl. Love the show. The best part of my commute on Thursday is prepping me for a night of games. Best, Locum.
Oh, thanks, Locum. I'm sorry
Locum.
you dealt with that.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think it's pretty funny.
The part that's crazy to me is going in for a game too with this player.
Yes.
I was gonna
wild.
say I can't
That is
believe you
wild.
played another game with this dude. Like,
Yeah, I am shocked.
I would have not played rather than play another game.
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
that guy.
I'd rather
It's
watch my
probably
friends
how
do a
much.
4-person game than sit in with
Yeah.
that. Like, that's ridiculous, man.
Also, first die throw. I think we've had cards get thrown.
I've had Blightsteel Colossi being thrown.
We've had
but-
Blightsteel Colossi get thrown, but I
Yeah.
don't think we've had a die get yeeted yet.
It's kind of like a funny thing to include because it doesn't have a ton to do with the game, but it is just like a very awkward moment at the table where you could see someone being kind of like, actually, and like chucking a die, and then you're like, "Hey, this dude just threw your die," and he's like, I'll find it.
Yeah.
When like it was read at first, I thought it just meant that like he just threw it across the table, kind of at this person in a weird way.
Yeah.
But then when it like gets lost, I'm like, did he actually just throw it across the room?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like just straight up, yes, like gone, and you're just like, what? Like,
Just
what did
yeeted
you
and
just
yossed.
do?
Yep. Yote.
Oh, yeah,
He
absolutely
yoked.
yote.
You just yoted it away. Never yote someone else's dice.
There are a bunch of interesting moments in this one. I think like the first moment that kind of it doesn't feel super unnatural for a typical game is when you have two players that are both like threatening wins, both threatening combos, and they kind of start to play like the blame game against the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Like Locum had known information with the dockside in their hand. At that point, the team where Sabretooth was hidden, they had top decked it. So no one knew they had that combo. But the Zur player had drawn a shit ton of cards, had a combo piece on the board. It's one of those things where I think we've talked about this in past episodes, where if you talk a little bit too much, I think it points out that you're the threat. You know what I mean? Like if you're deflecting too hard and you're like, well, you two are dockside, well, you're doing this, then I don't know. I think it kind of calls into question like what your aims are, and it makes your deflecting look a little bit more obvious. Whereas if you're just pointing out that a deck has already drawn a fuck ton of cards or something like that, that's a little bit more straightforward of like a politicking move to kind of deflect.
Yeah, and keeping it about like the game and the actions that have been taken is also better. Like, hey, that Ristic has triggered a bunch. That's kind of a more effective politicking tool than like, I think I'm actually totally justified to put Ristic Study in my deck. It's completely fine. It's a good card. Because that's just
yes,
like
it is.
that's like it's elevating the conversation to something that distracts from the fact that you're trying to point out that you're not as threatening as other people, you know?
Yeah, but he was pointing out that he was fucking stroking himself. So, like, what more could he do? Poor guy. You know what? I feel bad for this guy now.
Is this you, Tony?
Shut the fuck up.
I don't know. When someone is just commenting over everything you're doing, like this is kind of like the story you were telling earlier, Mike. Like that person had a little comment for every action you took, had a little thing to say, a little like bit of displeasure they wanted to sprinkle across the table every time a decision was made or something like that. I think players that are too annoying at the table sometimes get the heat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're huffing and puffing and causing a scene, or even if you're not, even if you're just kind of being unpleasant, like people might try to knock you out first because you're just not really contributing to that social piece of the game. And, you know, they just want to like shuffle up with someone else.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird dynamic, honestly. Like I don't know that I can really advise it. I've definitely kind of done it myself a little bit, but you don't want to be forced into a position where you're trying to kill someone because they're annoying to play with. But
yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction that I feel like people do have.
I think there's like a vibe that comes with playing EDH games, and you need to like see what the pod wants to do. I mean, this is sort of, I'm going to keep pointing back to it, but the game that you talked about at the start of the episode, Mike, where you have a group of people that are kind of like-minded, want to have a similar gaming experience, and then you have a fourth person come in, and if they don't quite fit, then it can make the gaming experience unpleasant, and that can produce salt or some frustration with just like how you're spending your time.
Yeah.
And I think that influences politics and just like how the game plays out a little bit. I'm not saying like don't play Magic with the weird kid at your LGS. Like play with that person, play with everybody at your LGS, you know? But like that does have a bearing on how like politics are done and how people react to how you're pointing things out. It's kind of like that line, like the lady doth protest too much. If you're protesting with every single action that gets taken, at a certain point, it's going to fall on deaf ears and people just aren't going to care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, you do have to take some of the actions that Locum took in this beforehand. Like, someone's really frustrating you. No, Tony, not that.
Tony is so hung up on that. Oh my God.
I just can't believe that he just like said that.
You can't believe
It's
that?
so close to things you say, Tony.
Yeah,
it's
but
so
it's so
close.
up your alley, this behavior.
Close and the same is very different.
Yeah.
Not.
It's
There's
totally
so
different.
many times where I think you usually just say circle jerking instead of stroking
He
your cock.
laughs
Exactly.
maniacally.
Yeah, laughs knowingly. You say this
I'm
exact
never
same
saying
shit.
it like so aggressively though. It's like, you know, like playful when I say it. I feel like this is an aggressive stroke, you know.
Oh my God. Well, I do think the word cock is very off-putting.
Yeah.
pretty much across the board. I think it's pretty off-putting.
Exactly.
That's definitely something going on here. Yeah. That's not
Yeah.
the most pleasant.
Well, what do we think about the salt rating on this one?
It's pretty high.
It's high salt.
It's high, but like I think the thing that really does get me, and I almost don't know how to describe it, is that another game was played. I feel like
Yeah,
that's the
it's
thing that is
crazy.
like the most
It's crazy.
confusing to me of all of this.
And also, like, a lot of these stories are something where we react to with like, yeah, okay, that's intense. Did you try talking about it? Like, did you try to talk through this? And
Yeah.
this story multiple times mentions, yeah, we tried to talk through it. Like, I tried to mention, hey, you're on my back. Like, hey, you're
Yeah.
really being annoying right now.
You got to calm
You know,
down.
tried to use words multiple times, and it didn't work. Like, it didn't have the actual ability to get that through this person's kind of thick skull.
Yeah.
And still signing up for game 2 after that's like kind of just masochism at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the point where someone transcends from a salty player to a salt lord, or salt monster, where you can't reason with them at that point. They are going to be wicked salty no matter what.
Yeah.
It's high salt, but at the same time, Locum went in for a second bite. So
Yeah. He liked it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder sometimes with these salty stories if there's an element of like, I am gonna mess with this dude even more by just continuing to play against him.
Sometimes that is fun. I won't lie. Like I've been in scenarios like that where it's like somebody's like losing their shit and you're just like, I'm not. I'm just like chill and like I like watching them unravel.
Yeah, it's like that saying, the best revenge is just living a good life. The best revenge is just having a good game afterwards. You're like, yeah, let's play again. It's gonna be great. All right, let's do one more, guys. This one comes to us from our Gmail. It's a Gmail submission. Comes to us from our buddy Matt. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
And the post title is "Scooping at Instant Speed." Smiley face. A little colon capital D there. So big smile. And the story goes, hey all, I have a wonderful salty story about scooping at instant speed that I'd love to share. A little background just for shits. The person I had this interaction with is one of my best buds, and he got back into the game a few years ago. I cannot stress how much this guy enjoys a salty card or play. As I got better at the game, I learned to love it too. Anyways, one night I was on Phylath and he was on Kozilek. Other commanders in the pod aren't relevant for the story. Get fucked, third and fourth player.
A double.
At least it's both of them, not just one of them.
Yeah, mark those bingo cards, everybody. He was building up a nice board state and had a ton of artifacts on the field. Swimming in artifacts, bros. Living the dream. If it got back to him, he'd tap with a ton of mana and probably win the game. My board wasn't a slouch at this point either. I had Phylath and some thick plants, accompanied by some other creatures, etc. I should have cast Overwhelming Stampede at this point. I would have had it, but I couldn't help it. I was taught from the best Salt Lord I know after all. I instead cast Natural Order to find Bane of Progress, knowing full well that if it resolved, my friend's board would be obliterated and he'd stand no chance to win. Lol. I'm flipping through my deck with a nice grin going, loving what I'm about to do, and it clicked for him. He realized that I was searching for Bane of motherfucking Progress, baby. And he says, I scoop. I'm picking up my cards before the Bane ETBs, so you don't get any counters for my stuff being destroyed. What a salty play. This is one of the only times I was able to enjoy pure salt bliss for 5 minutes or so. Ended up winning the game next turn rotation. We were chill right after, and it was hilarious to talk about post-game, but boy, oh boy, was he tilted for a little while. Love the show. Been listening since the early days. Take care, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. I thought this was going to go different. I thought he was going to be like, I was searching for it, didn't find it, but he scooped. Failed to find.
Yeah, it wasn't in the deck. Accidentally took it out of the deck, but
that's something I would do.
Should we read Bane of Progress? Do people know what this card does?
Let's read it.
Sick.
Read it.
Bane of Progress is a 2/2 creature elemental, costs 4 and 2 green, and it says when Bane of Progress enters the battlefield, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Put a +1/+1 counter on Bane of Progress for each permanent destroyed this way.
I feel like it's kind of like an oldie but a goodie. Like I feel like you see less of it these days, but it used to be like a pretty common green card. I feel like I haven't seen one in a while, but like it's sort of fallen out of favor, I think, a little bit. But
It's a classic Commander card from way back when. It was first printed in Commander 2013 and then pretty much only printed in Commander products after that.
is there a borderless version?
There is not a borderless version, Tony. I'm sorry.
Don't even want it.
Yeah, there
Can't
is
be a good
one
card.
like alternate art, but I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of bling with this one.
It's
Nice.
the bane of that, right?
Yeah, no progress.
Yeah, it doesn't want to progress into these new frames and borders and stuff. It's trying to stay OG here.
Only old border.
I feel like the salt on this is kind of twofold because it's not only the salt of like not getting the counters and everything, but it's also the salt of the player who conceded at instant speed.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty firm on like if something like that happens, like I will always just be like, well, I'm getting the counters. I don't care. I just like hate when people do that. It's not
Yeah.
a thing for me in our pod in particular. Like I think on occasion somebody will do that. It's pretty fucking rare.
I can't even think of a time where any of us have scooped to deny something.
Maybe it's even just happening in games that we've played.
Yeah, sometimes we would maybe do other stuff to deny something. Like maybe
Yeah.
if you have a sack outlet for all of your artifacts and treasures, or like
Oh,
artifacts
yeah.
and enchantments, maybe you'll sacrifice everything,
I think that's just good play, though.
even
No,
if
it
you're like
is, yeah,
about to
yeah.
die. But like, yeah, we never really
We
scoop
never
as a
deny people's
response.
yeah. I think we'll jokingly say it sometimes.
Yeah,
Oh,
almost.
definitely.
We'll jokingly
Yeah.
say it almost every
Almost
time.
every
Yeah.
time.
Like all it takes is a creature having lifelink, and I'm scooping right before it
Yeah.
does damage to me every
Yeah.
time.
Or when someone plays one of those lands that comes into play untapped if you have two or more opponents, I'm like, if we concede right now, it taps.
Yeah, we all concede.
But yeah, that's like definitely a Magic pet peeve of mine. Like
Mhm.
I've been at tables with like other randos before where that's happened. I was like, you should just take the thing. Like whatever benefit you're gonna get, like it's just like so silly when people do that. I don't like that. It's not for me.
I mean, we've talked about it on a lot of episodes in the past, but I just think it's so silly to say I'm going to lose the game. And at that point, like, who cares what's still going on in the game? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that
Mhm.
just happened after you're gone. Like, you would rather 100% lose the game and scoop versus like 90% lose the game and have to at least ride it out and like see what happens. Like, you could top deck the ultimate card to just turn everything around. You know, so I don't know. I think that's just such whack behavior for so many reasons. It is funny that there's like two pieces of salt here because this person, Matt, wanted to make his friend be salty.
Yeah.
And he was denied that, but the friend still got pretty much just as salty
Yeah.
and basically quit the game because they're so salty. So,
Yeah.
you know, I guess you did technically kind of get the effect that you wanted. You didn't even need to cast it.
I love these moments. Two friends, like there's so much kind of untalked about context here of like they know each other's decks so well. They know each other's reactions to things. Like they know that Bane is the thing getting tutored. They know that this player would tutor Bane of Progress. Like there's just so many layers of really knowing each other and like clearly a friendship being here already that's just heartwarming to me.
Yeah,
And the
for
salt
sure.
is truly just like the lens in which they had a fun game.
Yeah.
We had a fun game day by like getting each other today, you know? It's great.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like we have a little bit of that in our group too, where, you know, sometimes like the salty cards come down and all you can do is just kind of laugh at the salt and laugh in the moment. And I think when a group gets to that point where they can enjoy that salt a little bit, it actually makes the games less salty overall.
Yeah.
Because you're finding like the joy in those moments with the big counter plays and the big moments that just like overtake your board and ruin things for you and stuff like that.
Fuck. Yeah. What do you think about the salt rating on this one?
I think it's a secret sugar break, man. I think it's a secret sugar break here.
Yeah, but it's like a salted taffy where like it is sweet and nice, but there's definitely salt as a part of it.
Yeah.
Salt at the core, you know?
Yep.
Yep.
It's an integral part even.
Yeah.
100%. But like it even says it at the end, like they were able to goof around after the game and just kind of laugh about it and how hilarious the play was. And, you know, I think that's another thing that comes from having a tight group of players is you get these like silver bullet cards that you start to run to mess with each other's decks. And when those come up, it's just such a funny moment. It's like whenever anyone plays like Graveyard Hate, against one of Tony's decks, he's just like, you don't even have to use it on him. It just comes down and he's like, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the sight of it.
Hashtag fun B.
Yeah, B.
Respect the feud.
Respect the feud, everybody. Hashtag.
One more. One final.
One more.
Let's do one more. Let's do it. This is another Patreon post. This one comes to us from our buddy Moshi. And the post is titled, Salt Has Entered My Veins. And it goes, hey guys, just a heads up for this story. It's a long one. And please don't address me by my actual name. You can just address me by Moshi. All right. Done and done.
I'm glad that was what it was, because at first I was like, oh, he already did.
Yeah. By my actual name, which is Moshi. Do not say it. And I'm like, I already said it. This episode is live streamed. We can't pull it back.
Yeah, there's just simply no way. We don't have the 3-second delay that we need in order to cut that immediately before it goes out.
All right. This is a chronological post. This is Salt over 4 weeks. So here we go. Week 1. It was another Modern Monday at my local gaming store. That night, I figured I would play Modern Goblins with conspicuous Snoop combo, have Snoop out, tutor for Kiki on top of the library with Bogart Harbinger, then proceed to make Harbinger with Bogart Harbinger. Is it Harbinger or Harbinger?
Probably Harbinger. It's kind of like Goblin Charudagarn.
It's nothing like Goblin Charudagarn. It's not
I'm
even
looking
close.
at Bogart. Nothing even comes up, man. I just want to get it right.
It's definitely Harbinger.
Isn't it Boggart?
Boggart?
Boggart Harbinger. Boggart.
Am I living in like alternate pronunciation dimension where I have everything wrong? Or are you guys just being goofy?
I always said Bogart. Is it Boggart?
Boggart.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Should we Google it? Should we Scryfall it?
No, we're beyond
Does
it.
Scryfall have pronunciations?
It is Bogart.
Bogart. Okay, cool. Yeah, like quit Bogart in that doobie, bruh.
Well, wait. Yeah, but is that pronunciation different than the goblin?
Oh man, we're too deep.
I need
in it.
disambiguation. I need Bogart disambiguation.
We got to call up Morrow right now. How do we pronounce this word? Get Gavin on the phone.
Oh, it's 2 G's, dude. It's gotta be different than
Boggart.
Bogart.
Gotta be Boggart.
It's gotta be Boggart.
All right, we'll say Boggart. We'll go with Boggart. Boggart. Now I've said it too much, or now it means nothing to me anymore. Boggart.
Maybe it's Bogart.
Ooh. Or maybe it's like yogurt. Bogart.
Isn't that what you say normally? Haven't you been saying Bogart?
Oh man, no, Bogart versus Bogart.
Oh,
Bogart.
okay,
Like Gogurt.
okay.
Bogart.
Now it just sounds like you're saying
Got it.
Bogart, but weird.
All right, we're way too deep in it. I'm pulling back. Let's restart this. Okay. That night, I figured I would play Modern Goblins. Is it modern or is it modern?
It's goblins. It's modern goblins.
That night, I figured I would play Modern Goblins with conspicuous Snoop combo, have Snoop out, tutor for Kiki on top of library with Bogart Harbinger, then proceed to make infinite Snoops, then copy Harbinger for a Mog fanatic and do infinite damage. It's a cool combo. Love that shit. Well, my friend that I've known for a long time was on Amulet Titan. It's all about bouncing lands, making a bunch of mana, and playing Primeval Titan. Primetime, baby. Well, my friend at the time goes to try and win and double cast Summoner's Pact to get both Titans out of his deck, then starts playing bounce lands and floating mana since he has Amulet of Vigor out. Well, I was new to playing against this deck, so I didn't scoop and asked him to play it out so I would know when I could use my interaction. Well, he keeps trying to shortcut things and skip over how he's netting mana, and multiple times I have to ask him, wait, how are you doing that? Is that really how it works? I'm just trying to understand what's going on. Well, he ends up misplaying and not killing me and doesn't have the mana to pay for Pact, so I end up winning that game due to the Pact triggers.
You should have just wound it back.
No. He said to me after game 1, well, you got me. Good job, with the most saltiest tone. Oh, so it would be like, well, you got me. Good job. Something like that.
Or maybe more emo, like, well, you got me. Nice job.
It's not a nice job, Tony. You flubbed the line, dude.
Well, I forgot it part way, and then I was like, shit, what's the line?
Aren't you like an actor?
That was why there was a pause. Yeah, but like when I do it, I get to do what I want. It's not like
Oh my gosh. Improv. He's improving. Game 2. My opponent mulligans to 4, and I snap kept 7 with just a turn 3 combo in my hand. I ended up winning and 2-0'd him. After the game, he kept saying how I'm so fucking stupid and can't fucking believe I didn't play a round packed. And I guess you got me, but you outplayed me so well. I could tell he was salty, so I just left him alone. But he was my friend, so I told him, don't be so hard on yourself. It is just a card game. That's not really what you want to hear in those moments, but I appreciate where your heart is at.
Yeah, it is what you need to internalize, but it's never what you want to hear.
Week 2, he is now playing Merfolk Tribal. I'm playing Reanimator, trying to get Atraxa Grand Unifier in play, then ephemerating it to get crazy value. It was down to the last game in the batch. I hard cast a Solitude on a Merfolk Lord and go to block a Tide Shaper. I ask him before we go to blocks, does Tide Shaper have a +1/+1 counter on it? His reply, no, it does not. I said, then I will block it. We go to blocks and I block it, and he says, okay, your Solitude dies, right? And I say back to him, no, your creature doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it. And he explains that it has +1/+1, not a +1/+1 counter. So they trade.
Mm-hmm.
Due to this, I end up losing the game. So I quickly reply to him, you got me. A little salty after this, but I accept it is my fault. And I guess he was playing to his outs. But still, come on. We all knew what I meant. Interesting. The plot is thickening. Week 3, same player. We are in the top 4. I'm once again playing Reanimator. He was playing Hammer. Down to the last game, he had an Urza Saga pop and floats 1 mana, not stating anything. Maybe he did possibly, but I didn't hear him. He goes through search for an artifact, puts it into play, and goes and plays a Pure Steel Paladin, then Hammer. He had an Ornithopter in play and goes to equip the Hammer. I look all around his board to see if he has the mana to activate Inkmoth, and he has no lands except the Inkmoth, so I go to Fatal Push the Ornithopter in response to the equip. Thinking I am safe from an equipped Inkmoth, I kill the Ornithopter. Then he looks at me and says, using the 1 floating mana from Urza Saga to make Inkmoth a creature, and I asked him, you floated mana? He says, yes, I said that. And while I didn't see you represented in any way, how am I supposed to play around that? He said, just ask if I have floating mana. I end up dying to Inkmoth, having Infect, and hitting me for 11. Disappointed, I feel a little cheated after that game, but go on to continue to have fun. But every time I play this player, he just mauls, even when he wins the match. Week 4, I am playing Death and Taxes this week, drew super hot, and had super good matchups, so I end up only losing 1 game and winning all my matches, so that's super sweet. I was feeling good. Then I get home just to hear that player complain that I got all my best matchups. That's why I won.
Ugh.
At this point, I hope I play him and clown on him. Why play the game if you're just going to spike and try to win the games by hiding information? I don't know. I'm over him being a salty baby and crying whenever I beat him as well. Makes it hard for me to enjoy my favorite game. Lot to unpack with this one.
Yeah, there's a lot in this.
Multi-weeks.
An epic saga.
Let's go week by week, right?
Yeah.
They try to play through their Primeval Titan combo and they fucking fail. And I mean, for me, like, those are kind of the breaks, man. Right? Like, if you don't know your combo and you can't execute it well, then like, sucks to suck. Sometimes you have to force your opponent to walk through a combo.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the danger of some of those like more well-known ones where it's like, instead of going through it enough for every time, you're like, oh, it's like I just win now because of like it does the thing. And so people are like, okay, and then they just shuffle up and play again instead of like actually having you play through it.
Right.
Yeah, I think sometimes with those combos where like the sequencing is a little bit challenging or something like that, like you might have somebody who, when they're goldfishing the deck at home, they just get to the point where they have the combo and then they don't execute through it. So like you could get reps with the deck and experience with the deck, but maybe not experience running through the combo itself, you know?
Because you just assume that the game's done at that point.
Yeah. And like sometimes if you have one piece of interaction in your hand, it's important for them to go, yo ho ho. But sometimes if you have sometimes if you have a single piece of interaction in your hand, you do need to have people sequence through it because you might be able to stop it. Like that happens in our cEDH games. I feel like, Tony, you're really good at questioning people when they're like, okay, and then I have my win, and you're like, well, how do you win? Because I might be able to do something, and like it's critical to see how you walk through the win, especially with decks like Sisay or Dawnwaker, where they have like different avenues to get to that win, it's kind of important to see it actually go through.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate though, because when I say that, then they're like, okay, now I know you have something. So then they usually do something else to be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of frustrating because like,
Yeah.
I probably could have gotten somebody with a gotcha, but like as soon as I like have to be like, well, no, I don't want to skip it. I want you to like play it out. They're like, okay, well, fuck you. And then I usually get hard locked.
That is one kind of cool thing about the tournaments is usually people want you to play it all out. So it's like kind of the expectation.
Yeah.
There's a little less like maybiness to it.
Yeah. Like the default is people just walking through the full combo.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, week one sounds like it's just salty bad breaks. Your opponent piloted incorrectly, water under the bridge, right? Week two, this is the +1/+1 versus the +1/+1 counter debacle.
Yeah.
Which I think is scummy as fuck.
Yeah.
I don't know. Objectively, listening to it, like he asked, does it have a +1/+1 counter on it?
Yep.
And like to me, I was like, okay, no, it doesn't. And then he's like, I have a Lord, and that's giving a +1/+1.
Yeah.
Or that's what it sounds like happened.
I do
And so,
agree.
yeah, like it's kind of board state. Like you kind of are responsible for like knowing that in many scenarios, I will be like, but it's like getting +1/+1 from something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, like,
you're not obligated to.
I will just say, objectively reading it, I was like, yeah, he kind of got you a little bit. It's like not a good gotcha, but like gotcha.
It is a gotcha. Yeah, and you can get around that by one, maybe looking at the board super intensely to try and see if there's any anthems, but also just asking directly, what's the power and toughness? That'll give you the exact answer you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know, man. That just gives me a bad taste in my mouth, though.
I guess, but usually once it happens enough, you also change. Like I usually know, I no longer like, oh, does it have a +1/+1 counter? I'm like, what the fuck is its power and toughness? What things do you have on the board that can do this?
Yeah,
like,
once
I try
one-
and
exactly.
say like, what can happen? Like, what can impact things?
Yep.
And usually I'll be like, if I attack you with this thing, am I gonna get got? Like, it's
Right.
but that's just from the pain of that happening over and over again, right? So it's like, you're gonna learn today. Gotta do it somehow.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that is true. Sometimes you gotta learn, but that would make me salty, man. That would make
for
me
sure.
fucking salty,
For sure.
I think.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
When it comes to week 3, we have another little bit of like board state representation, which is the floating mana for turning Inkmoth Nexus into a creature.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Urza Saga, you gotta represent that shit because sometimes people forget that they can float the mana. Like it's such a weird little niche rules thing where you can float that 1 mana before the 3rd chapter gets completed.
Yep. The other thing is like you could tap it to make a construct or something. Like there is other stuff you can do with that land.
Yeah.
It's truly not just something you can assume that the one is floating. Like maybe that's your default case, but it's not always the thing you're going to do.
Well, the problem too is like that they did announce it, but it's not enough in this scenario because like once you play through your turn up through like combat, right, and you've done a bunch of other stuff, it is very like, wait, what the fuck mana is left or anything? Like I get confused with my own shit. Like when I do have it represented, like I'll have it represented and I'll be like, fuck, well, I forgot about it. So that mana's just gone now, I guess. But like,
I feel you.
Yeah, having it represented in some way, shape, or form, it's so easy to just like pop a dice out, right, and just be like, this is my like floating mana of whatever.
And that's the thing. Like, okay, maybe in the week 2 situation, the onus is on OP here to be like, what's the power and toughness? Like a clean, direct question.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's ever the opponent's responsibility to be like, and what floating mana do you have right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that shit should be represented somehow on the board. I don't know if there's like a hard rule about it, but it definitely doesn't feel like clean play to me. I don't know. That one's a little bit salty.
Yeah.
Week 4 is really just like a little cherry on top of this player being like, yeah, you only won because you had good matchups.
Yeah.
It's one of the most soul crushing
like
things.
Takes the wind out of your sails.
Yeah.
It's very like I was feeling good, like had good games, and then they're just like, oh no, you suck still. And I'm like, oh, okay.
No, it wasn't your skill. It wasn't you at all. It was just the opponents were bad and you got lucky, frankly. This is like an interesting saga of Salt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of feels to me like the narrative here is week 1, you have this situation where like a bit of messy play gets somebody the loss. And from then on, it becomes this weird thing about like polarizing clean play moments where you're taking people at the exact letter of every word they say and every question they ask. And it's like kind of borderline rules lawyery and then borderline like hiding information a little bit. And it's not like expressly hiding the information, but it's like, well, you didn't ask the perfect question for me to give you that information. So I'm not going to give it up. Like, I don't know, man. That stuff, I think it just makes like friendships tense, you know?
Yeah.
Which it sounds like it's doing here.
Well, is it really a friend, or is it just someone that they keep playing against in the modern, in like the Friday night modern?
It's a friend that they've known for a long time.
Don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just the symptom of 1v1 formats are a little bit more competitive, and that shit is important, especially when there's like prizing on the line.
Which also, like, Magic is a confusing game no matter what, right? It just is. There's a lot that can be happening. But I will say in a 1v1, there's like, it's not like Commander where you have 3 board states that you're trying to read that are actually like physically farther away and different stuff. It's like, it is kind of on you to like know what's going on more, I would say, in like the 1v1 formats than it is in the others. That doesn't make it less confusing or less hard or anything. I'm not saying it's like that, but I feel a little differently almost, I guess, about it as a result.
Yeah, you're saying get good, Tony, right? You're saying get good
basically.
scrub.
Yeah. It's tough because you like, if you assume you don't have to ask all this stuff and like pull it out perfectly with like the perfect question, if you kind of operate under this like good faith assumption that the other person is going to be perfectly clear with you, it's very different than if you're doing what they had to do in this.
Yeah.
You know, like you can have kind of a different rhythm of the game. Whereas in this case, you really start to realize in a repeated fashion, okay, this is going to happen every time. Like this person is going to try and sneak an ankle shoot and like, or angle shoot or whatever the phrase is. You know, they're going to try and get you.
Ankle shoot Achilles.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Hit where the divine waters didn't touch or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it does set up this expectation of like angle shooting. And to your point, Tony, 1v1 formats, those little mistakes, games can be won or lost on those, as we're seeing in these
like
sports,
every time,
you know?
won and lost by those.
So, you know, you want to be a good opponent, but it's not the same as cEDH or EDH with the social dynamic where like being clear with information can help you win better and help you like foster, you know, good feels at the table and shit like that. You don't really need that.
And there's 2 other people trying to be clear about information that have a vested interest in you knowing what's going on that person's board often.
Yeah, that is true. Someone else can like jump in and clarify as well.
It also makes me think about Arena a little bit. Like maybe you could argue it's a little bit clearer on Arena, but like you can't talk to the person, right?
Yeah.
Like you literally are just like tracking what's in front of you and like that's it. And like mistakes are made all the time and like
and once it's made, there's no winding it back.
Can't back it up. Yeah. You can't rewind your packed trigger. Like you're just like fucking going for it.
No, you cannot.
And especially effects like anthems and things like that are so clear and obvious on Arena.
That is the benefit for sure.
Honestly, anthems, I think when you're first getting into Magic, those are one of the more confusing things because people are like, oh, well, it's this now. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves with Magic is when people put dice to show the new power and toughness on their creature when there's an anthem in play.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't do that. That's a fucking counter. Don't do that shit at all, man. Like, we'll just remember that it has +1/+1.
And then you swing into them and then they're like, oh, but because of this lord, your thing dies. And you're like, fuck.
Like, board state, misrepresenting board state.
Got him.
But I really do dislike that dice thing that people do, man. I hate
I totally get you.
Like, that's a different thing.
What do we think about the Saul rating here on this one?
Oof, what a saga. What a salty saga, man. I feel it. I feel the tension in these games. It doesn't seem like big salt, but it seems like a lot of those little grains that start to just like tip the scales towards saltier and saltier interactions, you know? It's like the tension in the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's a steady stream of it that you can't really avoid too if you're playing in more of like an event oriented thing, like, or if there aren't many people playing Modern at your store, like you're just going to kind of face this over and over again. And it has this element of like, so like self-defeatingness too, of like, or not self-defeating, but self-frustration of, oh, I didn't ask the right question in order to get to the bottom of this. And that's always pretty painful.
But also you just got to like play better decks because your decks suck apparently. So
Exactly.
you're not good anyway.
Yeah, next time just try like doing a good job. That usually works really, really well.
Good point.
Have you tried being better?
Yeah,
Good point.
It'd be really more like us, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
I know nothing about Modern. I will say, like, play other formats with this friend. Like, bust up some fucking Commander decks if you guys are down with it. Like, if your only Magic interaction with this buddy is really tense Modern games, then that could eventually kind of sour some things. So it'd be nice for you guys to be able to enjoy the hobby of Magic in other formats where the stakes aren't quite as high. You know,
It's true.
Yeah. What do they say?
Yeah.
Change is the spice of life.
Do they say that?
Something like that. There's some phrase that's like
I
that.
thought it was black pepper. Is the spice of life?
Is it that time of the week?
It's feeling like that time of the week.
I think it might be that time of the week.
Man, what a I've never been dissed through a transition to a new segment before, but man.
But it was good.
Yeah, it is that time of the week, Tony. It's the time of the week that comes every week.
Every fucking week, baby. Lay it on me. What is it?
It's the time of the week where we say, Mike,
Mike.
what's the salty card of the week?
The salty card of the week
I'm never gonna cast again. These counter spells have got me tilted. Though it's easy to deflect, I know you're playing blue. Tonight my salted feels so loud. I wish that I could target with Shroud. Maybe it's better to play. We hurt each other with the salt we wanna say. We could have been so good together. We could have kept this deal forever. But now who's gonna deal with me? Please, Scoop, yeah.
I was
Nice.
so close to
Thanks.
being like Stinky Linky. But I was like, I feel like Sam has like this whole thing, so I can't crush his dreams.
Thanks, man. I wrote that Careless Whisper one like weeks ago, and I've been singing it like all the time.
Slay.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thank you,
Mike,
Sam.
I was like, what happens now? Oh,
Yeah,
like...
I think we just end the show now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The salty card of the week this week is Embargo,
The fuck is
What
this
does that
card?
do?
right?
It's probably white.
It's not even. It
Red?
is from Invasions, though. So that sometimes, it's one of those. Or Mercadian Masks. I'm so sorry. Cut it. Take it out. Embargo. It is a 3 and a blue enchantment.
Gross.
Non-land permanents don't untap during their controller's untap steps.
Oh my fucking god.
At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 2 life.
Weird. Okay.
Wait, did it also say opponents? Did it say opponents?
Just period. Non-land permanents don't untap during their controllers untap steps.
Okay,
It's
okay,
symmetrical.
Yeah, I was just making sure that it was at least fucking symmetrical.
So, Tony, how does this make you feel?
Blue is a trash color for trash fucking people.
He
And
has the
this is
shirt on
type-
right now,
I
folks.
actually do.
He's got the hoodie on right now.
This is like one of my top hated types of effects of blue.
Tap stuff.
Like, yeah, like you can't tap and you can't untap. Like,
Mhm.
like get fucked. Ugh. I just hate this shit. It's like there's nothing else to say other than I fucking hate this card. I hate this effect. I'm glad that I didn't know like what it was when you read it because it means I haven't seen it.
True.
So that's probably what I like about it the most. But
Yeah.
like the types of decks that run these have like 4 or 5 of these effects in it, and like knowing that there's another one out there that isn't like Winter Orb and Stasis and these other things makes me sad. Fuck blue players.
Sam, how do you feel about this one?
It would definitely get me salty. It doesn't get me as salty as things like Winter Orb or Stasis because you can still do some stuff. Like it's non-land permanents, right? So it's hitting your
Mhm.
mana rocks, it's hitting your creatures, which is kind of annoying. At the very least, it is making people lose life. Like
It's
like
only
there
making
is-
you lose
It's
life.
only you lose life.
It's just at the beginning
Oh,
of your upkeep.
beginning of your
you lose
upkeep,
2
you
life.
lose 2 life.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
Commander like won't fucking matter, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. This one feels like it might be a little bit easier to break parity on because it's symmetrical. Maybe the game actually has like a defined end versus just a slog that Stasis brings. But at least you don't skip your untap step. At least you still have one.
Yep. You do have one.
And if you had like a Seedborn Muse, you can get all your other shit untapped, or Drum Bellower.
And now Sam's like, actually, I'm gonna run this in fucking.
Actually, it seems like a pretty good card.
See it in Thrasios Bruce.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be doing a new brew with Seedborn, Drum Bellower, Unwinding Clock,
Village Bell Ringer.
Yeah, a bunch of vigilance for all my creatures. Pretty good. I mean, it's interesting. It would get me salty too. This is one of those cards that, like, if you're playing it, you need to have a game plan, right? Like, if someone plays this and then they have a Seedborn Muse out, I'm like, great. That means you're probably going to win the game. This is good.
Yeah,
we're not just
fucking
stuck
it
here.
makes
20
sense.
turns.
Right. Yeah, we're not just stuck here. Mike, how does this make you feel?
Haven't seen it too often. I kind of agree with what you said. It seems kind of like a Winter Orb or a Stasis Light to some degree. It doesn't touch the sacred lands, so like it probably makes sense. Like it seems like it would draw a little bit less salt potentially. It feels like they designed this after Stasis, trying to be like, what can we do that's like that but not quite as dumb?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll make it drain you so that the game has to end. We'll do all this stuff, but it would still be really frustrating if you are playing Voltron and you just swung and then someone plays this. Like that's really the painful moment, because your stuff that comes in untapped, so you at least get to choose when to use it or not. But if you've just done a big swing or all of your stuff is tapped and then someone plays this, that's like the most feel bad, painful moment that this can come down, I think.
Yeah.
So,
which is when it's going to fucking happen.
Yeah, which is probably when someone's going to want to play it. But at the same time, a lot of the time, this is like a 4-cost card sitting in your hand that you don't want to play because it's shooting yourself in the foot, unless your deck is very specifically constructed.
Yeah, I think this needs like a specific deck to play around it. And it's
But
probably
that's what
why
it's
I've
gonna
never
go
seen
in.
it.
It's not, this isn't the kind of card that you just slot into a blue deck. Like, this goes into like the decks that want to do that shit.
Yeah,
it
deny
belongs in,
resources and
right?
shit.
Rubinia. Belongs in Rubinia.
It probably does.
I don't know if it does, man. Maybe?
I don't know.
Maybe. It's a maybe.
Yeah. I don't know, because Tony also wants to untap.
But I have
doesn't he have
untapping
ways
effects.
of doing that? Yeah.
But you need the ability to choose to untap if you want to. If you can't choose to untap,
He never
then you
wants
just
to
don't untap.
anyway.
Yeah, it's true. He is just taking all the shit.
Well, where do you guys think this lands on the Salty Card of the Week list?
All right, real quick.
37.
Is this new? 37? So
it's not new, so I couldn't find the new list.
I don't think it's fully up yet.
I think they've talked about it, but I don't think they've put it public yet.
cEDH had an episode about it. They've talked about it, but we're still operating off the 2022 list, everybody.
Yep.
You said 37, Tony? I was going to say 40.
You can always make these claims. I said it first, so truly
Well,
I was
27
the
and
real
40?
The real deal.
37 and a 40.
All right, well, Sam takes it. It is at 84.
Oh
So
my
not
God.
not very, it's not a proud victory there.
Yeah,
but it is
not a very
victory.
sporting victory.
Yeah. Yeah. By
Mm.
default, really.
But I
Um,
also thought it was in the upper 50 because these effects typically are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there really is something about not touching lands that makes people way more
Less
comfortable
angsty.
with it. Yeah.
Also, just like scarcity. I've literally never seen this card in my life. I've
Yeah,
never
I
seen
thought it was
in the deck.
white, and then you were like red, and then they were
Yeah.
blue.
Yeah.
Yep. Blue.
Interesting.
Blurb.
It's a
All
weird
right.
one.
Well, that wraps it up for the Salty Card of the Week.
Well, thanks, Mike.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
a interesting salty card. And thank you to all of our prospectors out there for tuning into another episode of the Howling Salt Mine podcast. If you want more Howling Salt Mine, check out our Patreon. We have some new tiers there. We'll have episode shout outs. We've got custom tokens we're doing. We have a huge tier where we will go to a salt mine and record an episode
Yeah.
inside
Hell yeah.
the mine itself.
Yes, we do.
So if you are interested in that or any of our other bonus content, stray grains, extra salt, you know what they are. We talk about them every week. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/howling salt mine. Jump on in the Discord, hang out with us, play games with us on the monthly game night. Enjoy just a little bit more Howling Salt Mine every single week. We also have our awesome bonfire store where you can get merchandise. We've got some new shirts up there. Right now, our classic logo is up there for the next 30 days. Probably a little bit less than that now that this is coming out. And we have some other great designs up there and a couple new ones up there for you guys to check out as well. We also have our custom Dragon Shield sleeves. And another thing you can do to help out the podcast is to give us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app of choice. That really does help people find the show in the algorithm, in the wilds. Now that I've been saying that on the show during the closeout, we've had a bunch of people like messaging us on the side, sending us DMs, commenting on Spotify itself and saying like, yep, the algorithm works. I found you guys through Spotify, 10 out of 10, shit like that. So it is really, really cool to see that spreading organically in those avenues. And if you have a salty story that you want talked about on a future episode, send it to us at our Gmail, thehowlingsaltmine@gmail.com, or submit it on our website, The Howling Salt Mine or Howling Salt Mine. We have a little submission area there where you can send those stories into us. We'll throw them in our queue, and eventually you will hear it on the show. Probably.
Maybe.
Maybe. If it's good. It better be good. Make it good, guys. Send us salty confessionals, too. I love those. I need those.
Hell yeah.
And lastly, we got to shout him out every episode. Our amazing podcast artist, JD Burnett. If you are ever in Asheville, North Carolina, hit him up and get a tattoo. He's a really awesome dude.
10,000 subscribers are bust.
Indeed. Well, stay salty, everybody. And don't forget to draw an additional card during your draw step.
It's the Howling Salt Mine. The Howling Salt Mine.
You know, we just need one more guy. We'll go find someone on spell table. So.
Oh, wow. He's
Ooh, an eepy boy.
He's a little eepy boy.
Sorry, I did just wake up from a nice hour and a half nap. So a little eepy here.
Tony, your mic's a little bit hot, just so you know.
What do you mean? Like
It just sounds like you're
like it's
you're
like a 6.
It sounds like you're like peaking it a bit.
to move further away from it, you're saying?
Yeah, maybe just a smidgen. Maybe just a smidgen. I'm just saying.
Fuck you.
That one was extra confusing because you said that you say Mike and Tony, but you actually said, hey, Tony and Mike this time. And we responded Tony and then Mike. So you flipped it again on top of the flip.
Did I?
We did. Yes.
Yeah.
I really did say it right.
No.
Oh, no, not initially. No, you
Oh
said
my
it
God.
correctly initially, but then just now when you did your
Yeah,
thing,
exactly.
and
Oh
you
my
accepted
God.
yourself,
You
you
said,
like
hey,
flipped
Tony
it
and
on
Mike.
yourself.
Or you said, hey, Mike and Tony. And then Tony said, hey. And then I said, hey. And then you said, I always say Mike and Tony. But then,
Oh no.
yeah.
Can we-
And now this is all unusable.
Yeah,
So,
can we just step away from that bit and just do a hard pivot and talk about something else? Because I'm confused.
yes.
Well, shall we hit another?
Yeah, can you say it again? Not into your Nalgene bottle.
Shall we hit another?
Let's do it.
Well, everybody, shall we have another one? I mean, it sounds kind of good when you say it like that. Well, I think we just learned we need to do an entire episode into our Nalgene bottles.
Oh my God. We're ever under the water. That's how we'll fake the salt mine episode.
Yeah.
We really just have a weekend in New York City at an omakase.
Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah.
And then we're like, oh, wow, we're in the mine now. Oh, there's a bat. Wow. Just like sound effects off a soundboard.